May we now have your attention. We have come to this place in this time from many parts of our land and indeed from the whole world. And we are eager and anxious that the blessing of God should rest upon our fellowship together. And it is our privilege to have invited Dr. David Price, who is beloved to this institution as a regent and to the American Lutheran Church as its vice president, to ask the Lord's blessing on this coming together. Dr. Price.
Let us pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, Amen. Lord God, King of creation, we give thee thanks for this day, for this gathering, this college, these 100 years of blessed service and servants, the church this college serves, this beautiful setting with food and drink and beauty and friendship. May thy continued blessing be on this college, and may this blessing manifest itself through excited and exciting faculty and students, faith-filled ambassadors for Christ, creative servants of church and society, concerned human beings. Bless, we pray thee also, the various aspects of the centennial celebration of Augsburg College, and may those corollary efforts of this day of moratorium, help to bring quickly that which is sought by us all, peace among men. In the name of the Prince of Peace, amen.
At any table in this gathering this evening, to all the rest of you, as a table made up of distinguished guests. However, it just happens that tonight we are oriented in this direction, and this is the head table. Partly because it's raised up a little higher than all the rest of you, but not for many other reasons. But it is my privilege to introduce some of the people at this table and that table, and some of the people at the round table who will not otherwise be called upon in the course of our program this evening. And I would like to start out by asking Mrs. David Price, the First Lady at Lutheran Church of Hope, if she would rise. Mrs. Price. And now I think I'm going to have to do this only applause until I tell you, will you? Then I would like to introduce Mrs. Oscar A. Anderson, the First Lady of Augsburg College, if you will stand, please. Then I would like to introduce Mrs. Fred Schutz, who is the First Lady of the American Lutheran Church. And then I would like to introduce Mrs. Charles Stanwyck, who is the First Lady of the City of Minneapolis. And then I would like to introduce my wife, Sophia, who is the First Lady, period. Now may we move to this distinguished table in front of us here, and may I first call upon an honored guest, Mrs. Stoylan, who is here as a guest of Augsburg with her husband, Bishop Stoylan. And may I call upon Mrs. Leonard Ramberg, whose husband is chairman of the Board of Regents, and Mrs. Martin Quanbeck. All of us know Mrs. Quanbeck. And Mr. Ron Martinson, who is escorting the First Lady of Augsburg College, and that's part of the privilege of being vice president of the student body. Mrs. Bernhard Kristensen, known to us as Gracia, who has graced every occasion we have had at Augsburg College. Mrs. Leif Harbo, Mrs. Leif Harbo, and Mrs. Martin Sabol. Mrs. Sabol. And then Dr. and Mrs. Carl Christlock, who have been honored by the Augsburg family for Carl's special work in writing the history of Augsburg called From Fjord to Freeway. And will you wait just a minute? I want to say just a word. I remember that a man from another generation by the name of Clarence J. Carlson used to say that no college had a more comprehensive history than Augsburg College, and he referred to Professor Helland's Augsburg genom 50 år. And if my memory serves, I read or heard that Dr. Theodore Blagan said or underscored the same idea. Now I think we have to say this all over again, that no Lutheran college in America has a more scholarly, definitive history, this time in English, than does Augsburg College. And now, Carl and Mrs. Christlock, will you please stand? Now you can give them all the applause. We have some other distinguished guests, and a man who has interested himself in Augsburg College over a number of years, so that he has come back and visited this campus again and again, and been helpful in a multitude of ways, is Congressman Walter Judd. Would you please stand, Congressman Judd? Now I come to the Executive Secretary of the Centennial Commission. As you may have read in this program, I'm the chairman of the Centennial Committee, and we have had for the past 5 years, as the person who held everything together, saw that everything got done, and did a great deal of it herself, this amazing person, Miss Gerda Mortensen. Now, at this point in the program, I would like, as chairman of this Centennial Committee, to offer my deep thanks and my regard for Miss Gerda Mortensen, who in some kind of a stage in her retirement has shown more energy and zeal and wisdom than most of us who are quite a bit younger. I know that I am quite a bit younger than Gerda Mortensen, because when I was a student here, she and I had some problems because I was going steady, and you really weren't supposed to do that in those days. And now we've turned out to be bosom pals, and it's been wonderful to work with Gerda Mortensen. We're going to hear a little more from her a little later, but I think this gathering would like to show their appreciation with some special applause. I had dreamed how I was going to do this, Gerda, and it didn't come off as well from my part, but you understood what the rest of these people were saying to you. And Mr. Ralph Mortensen, who shares this evening with his sister, Ralph, would you stand, please? And then may I call upon another writer who has distinguished and honored the Centennial with his work, Dr. Melvin Helland, who is the translator of the Sverdrup writings published under the title of The Heritage of Faith. Dr. and Mrs. Helland, would you stand and take the applause of this Augsburg family? A little while later, we're going to hear from the next person I'm going to introduce, but I would like to introduce him, especially at this time. Sitting beside Gerda Mortensen here is Mr. Olaf Eriksson, who is a baritone soloist from Belgium, comes originally from Norway, and well known in Europe, and we're going to hear from him after a while. But would you stand, Mr. Eriksson, so they may see you? Now, at some of these other tables, I wish I could introduce everybody. I have a list up here of all of these distinguished people, and time just does not permit me to introduce all of you, but there are some who must be introduced. First of all, Mrs. Helga Sverdrup Ekheim, who is the daughter of Professor Edward Sverdrup, who was at the University of Oslo, which makes her a sister of our esteemed General Leif Sverdrup. Mrs. Ekheim. Is she from Oslo? She has come to be with us from Oslo, Norway. Then it is our privilege, and now it gets interesting because some of these people you haven't met before. It is our privilege to meet a number of members of the family of the first president of Augsburg, Professor August Venos. And first, I would like to introduce a daughter, Mrs. Frida Venos of Oslo, Norway. Would you stand, please? I couldn't help but observe the sparkle in this lady's eye when the students were singing. She really enjoyed that. She has with her her younger sister, Mrs. Magdalene Widstein of Mo i Rana, Norge. Would you stand, please? Now, I must say to all of you that the first lady who stood up is age 92, and the second one, her younger sister, is age 84. And while they may not know what I'm referring to, and some of you who weren't here this noon won't know what I'm referring to, I should say to these ladies that Professor Leland Saturn has his eye on you. Now we come to a grandson of President August Venos by the name of Mr. Ole Widstein, and he also is from Mo i Rana. Would you stand, sir? And from the same town with the same beautifully phonetic name, I like to say it, Mo i Rana. So does Gerda. I learned it from her. A great-granddaughter of the first president of Augsburg, Miss Marie Widstein. Marie? Now, isn't that something? Just think. Isn't that something? That this school somehow was able to bring these people together at this place. And we're not through yet. A nephew of August Venos, Mr. Weinos, I don't know whether the immigration people misspelled this or he did, but he spells it differently, and his wife, they are here from Vancouver, British Columbia. Now, may we have them stand, please? Are they here? There they are. Now I am going to ask, you know, I graduated in the vintage year here at Augsburg with people like Maury Helland and Vali Sverdrup. I haven't seen some of these people since 1933. And I, with great restraint, Vali, held myself up here because I wanted to go down and give you something. Will you stand, the two daughters, Catherine and Volley, and the son of Professor George Sverdrup? Will you? So we can see you. Now, he didn't mention that in his campaign, but you know that our mayor is their first cousin. I didn't hear you mention it in the campaign. I heard you say a lot of things, but I don't think that the Augsburg family knows that the mayor of Minneapolis is the first cousin of this Sverdrup family of ours. Now, I'm going to introduce a former student of Augsburg and a member of the family of Professor Andreas Helland, the earlier historian before Karl Krislak, who has come all the way from Bergen, Norway, and he is Pastor Johan Hilland. And Leland Saturn will have his eye on him too, because I'm told he is 82 years young. Now, is he here? Yes. There he is. Then we have a man who has served his country with honor and distinction, the Honorable Johan Hambro, who is now the General Secretary of Norrbundsforbundet, which for you Swedes and Irish and other assorted people means the Worldwide Federation of Norsemen, and it has its largest and I think its most vital chapter here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. May we have Johan Hambro stand, please. Thank you very much. Now, 50 years ago, we had Bishop Stoylan here as the featured speaker at the 50th anniversary. I said we, I wasn't around here at that time, but we, in the larger sense, had a bishop from Kristiansand, Norway, as our featured speaker for the golden anniversary of Augsburg College. And it has been a real privilege to have this man who has not only symbolized the spiritual and cultural heritage of Norway, but has communicated this to us in special ways during his visit. We have had the son of the first Bishop Stoylan, and this man is Dr. Kåre Stoylan, Bishop of Agder, Kristiansand, Norway. Bishop Stoylan is a nephew of Augsburg's second president, Georg Sverdrup, which would make him a first cousin of Augsburg's third president, Dr. George Sverdrup, and related to those people over there and a whole lot of other people here. Bishop Stoylan, may we see you. Now I come to a special group of guests who have contributed in highly specialized ways to Augsburg College or to this centennial observance. And first, Mr. B.J. Kemper, the Executive Director of the Minnesota College Fund. Mr. Kemper, over at this table over here. And Mrs. Kemper, would you stand too, please, Mrs. Kemper? And then we have Dr. E. Clifford Nelson and Mrs. Nelson, and Dr. Nelson is a regent of Augsburg College, also an eminent church historian, and a member of a special Centennial Publications Committee. Would you folks please rise? And then we have Dr. and Mrs. Warren Quanbeck, distinguished alumnus of this school, a distinguished theologian, known in this country and throughout the world, a member of the Special Centennial Publications Committee, who assisted Dr. Helland with the selecting of the Sverder passages that should go into the heritage of faith. Warren and Dagmar, would you stand, please? And I'm going to introduce Mr. Cyrus Rocchi. I have known him for many, many years, and I can say from firsthand experience that in addition to being a longtime friend of Augsburg College, he's a Lutheran layman with a record of many kinds of service to the church, and he is Senior Vice President of the Aid Association for Lutherans at Appleton, Wisconsin. Is Mrs. Rocchi with you? Would you folks please stand? And then another man who has served in a very special way on the Centennial Publications Committee, Dr. Lloyd Svensby of Augsburg Publishing House and the Board of Publications of the American Lutheran Church, and Mrs. Svensby. Now we come to Dr. and Mrs. John Stenswag. We've been talking about all the Georges tonight. Now we get to John. You know, I shouldn't have to introduce John. This is what you call, I don't know, everybody knows him. He has lived and breathed Augsburg College ever since I've known him back in the early 30s. He's Old Testament professor at Luther Seminary. He's the former president of the Lutheran Free Church and a friend of all of us. And John, will you and Mrs. Stensvog please stand? In the good old days in the LFC, if some of you remember what that was, we called them John and Hannah. Now I would also like to introduce Mr. Knut Nystedt and Mrs. Nystedt. This is Norway's distinguished composer, professor of music in residence last year here at Augsburg College, who has come all the way back across the ocean to be with us during this centennial observance. Now, you just have to read the information that is in this blue folder of yours about the musical event that takes place Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock over at Northrop on the University of Minnesota campus, because you are going to hear the composition of Dr. Nystedt, which was commissioned especially for this centennial. I have not had the privilege of being with Dr. Nystedt, but I have learned from the members of the Augsburg family here that in addition to being a distinguished and accomplished musician, he is a great person, and it is an honor to have you and Mrs. Nystedt back with us. Would you please rise? Now, I think that Consul General Scott Hansen is here this evening with Mrs. Hansen. Is Mrs. Hansen with you? Please. This is the man who represents the interests of Norway in this part of the world. Now, I'm going to add a little bit of a footnote here and say that we ought to give applause to a person who has not been in the limelight at all this evening, but who worked very hard to see to it that everything was in order for this dinner. And those who see to it that all things are now in order ought to be appreciated too. Would you give some applause to Miss Eileen Cole, who will stand now if she is here? Eileen? There she is. I am now going to convey a couple of greetings, and then I'm going to call on 7 or 8 people who will give brief greetings. I tell you that in advance so that you know that your greetings are brief. I listened to the faculty members give their 5-minute talks at the wrap-in this noon. You know, that was pretty bad. There wasn't one of them that was 5 minutes. They were 7, 9, 8.5. I didn't listen so much to what you said, but I timed you. And I am just positive that these people who bring the greetings this evening are not going to do what you did. But we'll have some brief greetings after a while. But before we do that, I'm going to try, and I mean try, to convey the greetings of the Augsburg family to 2 very special people who are here, namely Bernhard Kristensen and Leif Sabol. Bernhard Kristensen, who was Augsburg's 4th president, Leif Sabol, who was the interim president in a period of transition. And I kind of choke up when I'm going to talk about Bernhard Kristensen, because this man has had such a profound influence on my life and on the course that it took, and I believe on the destiny into which I was led, that it's hard to just stand and say some words. But this man has had a commitment to Christ and his church that I have almost stood in awe of, and I wish that I could have just a little part of it, who is held in the highest esteem and the warmest affection by all of us who have known him as teacher and as leader and as brother. And I think that Dr. Oscar Anderson would swing with me when I say that Augsburg College is more indebted to this humble man than to any other living person. Bernhard, brother, we salute you. You know, this isn't on my list, but would you come up here and say a few words to us, Bernhard? It would add something very special to the evening.
Mr. Toastmaster Luthard and Dr. and Mrs. Anderson, all good friends. When I heard just kind of roundabout that I might be asked to respond in a few words, and I'm very aware of it now, it occurred to me that I would just try, and I know I must do it in very few words, to sketch a picture of a little unscheduled centennial event that took place last week. Now, it concerns President Anderson to a considerable extent, and Mr. Fossey equally, but I didn't get any information from them. I got it over the telephone. And this is the scene. There has been a lady who, together with her husband a few years ago, established a fund here at Augsburg to provide scholarships for Augsburg students. Now she's on in years and she's not very well. She happened to come to Minneapolis because this had been her home before. And she wanted to come out to Augsburg, but she was not in a position to do it because of her health. And so somehow it was arranged that she and Mr. Fossey and President Anderson should have lunch together with 6 Augsburg students who this year received scholarships from this foundation or this fund which she and her husband established. And so they were down there at the Curtis. She told me over the phone when we spoke about it afterwards. I, of course, didn't know about it before. And I wish that this little gathering tonight could hear the warm enthusiasm of this older lady's voice as she told how glad she was to have this contact with Augsburg students. Evidently, they had a little program, and each one got up and told something about who he was and his life purpose, or what he was training for. And the lady said, I just couldn't get over it. Their openness, the freedom with which they spoke to President Anderson and to me, she said, an older person. And my traveling companion, a nurse who had traveled with her, said that she just wouldn't have missed for anything this opportunity. Now, as my little greeting on this centennial occasion, President Anderson, I wish for Augsburg in the future a continuing stream, and we know there will be, of this kind of fine students. And then a wonderful openness between the students and the administration and the faculty, such as was exhibited there. And then an increasing stream of these people, older or younger, who find their great joy in giving money to help educate students at Augsburg College. Thank you very much.
I was a regent of this institution at the time when we called Leif Harbo to step in on behalf of the Board of Regents and assume the helm during a period of transition. And I well remember, and I think you do too, Oscar Anderson, the fine job that he had done in the transition between Dr. Kristensen and Dr. Anderson. So the helm of this institution was turned over to Dr. Anderson with everything moving along solidly and in good shape. Leif Harbo, will you please stand and receive the applause of this group? He's just like Gerda. He's retiring all the time, you know. And he has some new thing cooking. He tells me now he's just going to work part-time. That's Leif Harbo. Now I'm going to ask for some greetings. And I'm going to start with Mr. Donald Zander, who is Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs, representing Dr. Malcolm Moose, the President of the University of Minnesota. Mr. Zander.
Thank you. Instead of going down the head table, the whole thing, and thanking all of you, I think I'll just make it very short. The higher educational institutions in the state of Minnesota extend our heartiest greetings on this year anniversary, 100th anniversary in the state. I can hardly really speak for all of those institutions. I could speak personally from Concordia College, your sister institution, and I see some of my friends here from Concordia, and from the University of Minnesota, where I've worked for some 20 years now since leaving Concordia. We consider Augsburg as our favorite neighbor, and especially so since we've jumped the river, and now I have an office here on the West Bank, and I find this cafeteria really better than anything we have on the West Bank. So I come over here quite often, and we extend our happiest greetings, and I'm sure we'll work together in the University Community Development Association or cooperation and in many other ways cooperatively for the next 100 years. Congratulations to Augsburg.
Thank you, Mr. Zander. I am now going to call upon Dr. Frederick A. Schutz, the president of the American Lutheran Church, who is honoring us with his presence. He is a church leader who is our church leader, but we're always aware that we're under obligation to share this man with the whole world, and that's what we do. But we're honored to have Dr. Frederick Schutz with us this evening. May we have a greeting from you.
Mr. Toastmaster, Dr. and Mrs. Anderson, members of the Board of Regents, members of the faculty, honored guests, and friends of Augsburg College. Those of you who know me know that I much prefer to speak directly, not to read manuscripts. But in light of what our chairman said this evening about the faculty members, I better see to it that I have the insurance that is provided by reading a few sentences. Long before the Christian era, the Greek philosopher Heraclitus gained fame by announcing as the core of his philosophical orientation, Panta Rei, all things flow, or all things change. Our generation has grasped this point of view almost to the degree of idolatry. And yet there has never been a time when change was so much a part of all phases of life. In the September issue of Augsburg's Now, Dr. Anderson has issued a clarion call for a bold stance toward change. Now, if you have not read that, it's important in my judgment to note two sentences that are tucked away in the long recitation of changes which, in Dr. Anderson's judgment, Augsburg College must face. They are these: we would be among those who declare, God so loved the world. This never changes. Then again, this sentence: we must strike out boldly for the new, but we do this with the changeless in our hearts. At an international convocation to be held in New York City in mid-November, Dr. Karl Menninger will be speaking on the theme, The Search for Identity in the Midst of Changing Values. Now, the very name of this topic is the equivalent of saying that alongside of change, there must also be the sense of permanence. On behalf of the American Lutheran Church, I thank Dr. Anderson, his faculty, and the regents for what is represented in these two unifying notes of permanence embodied in Dr. Anderson's call for a stance toward change.
Now I am going to call on a representative of the state of Minnesota. During the campaign of Harold Lavandier, who subsequently was elected the governor of this state, his daughter, Mrs. King, Mrs. Jean Lavandier King, was active on his behalf, and some of the people who heard her speak said that if the day ever comes when we can have a lady governor in Minnesota, maybe she'll be it. So I'm now going to call on Jean Lavandier King.
Thank you very much. And if I kept all my speeches to 3 minutes, do you suppose I could make it? In that respect, I think it's probably good the governor isn't here, because I think it would be a hard time keeping him to 3 minutes. But he did want to come very, very much. And as a loyal Gustie and as a very strong Swede, he really did want to come and wish you well, too, on your anniversary. Unfortunately, he can't be here, but he does wish me to, or told me to wish you well for not only what you've done in the past and how you've served the state, but what you are going to be doing in the future. And our family, of course, observes a lot of traditions and a lot of ritual. And I really think that studies have shown that families and organizations that do this have a sort of strength in a community of interest that allows them to accept change and look into the future. And that's why I think it's important for communities such as Augsburg to celebrate their anniversaries and their centennials, because this brings together the group again. You see the traditions of the past, and it's not in an attempt just to reminisce and glorify what has happened, but it gives you the strength and the cohesion to face the new challenges that you will be looking at tomorrow. And so on behalf of Minnesotans, congratulations to you and good luck in the future.
You see what I mean? I noticed some of these Augsburg Democrats, there are a few looking at her kind of speculatively. Well, the future belongs to the young, and we're going to have more to say about that a little bit later on. But now we come to hear from the representative of the city of Minneapolis, the Honorable Charles Stanwyck, who is an alumnus of this institution. Mayor Stanwyck.
Reverend clergy, Dr. Gertie, Dr. Anderson, I keep this up, I'll have the speech done just in the addresses here. Distinguished guests, fellow Augsburg alumni, faculty, students, ladies and gentlemen, that does it. I've been sitting here and squirming more as the speakers have been progressing, because I knew I was going to be coming up here. And I think I ought to say one more thing at this time. I have other relatives too, the Aldals and the Sverips. At this time you can leave if you don't want to be embarrassed. All right? But I think as far as a message from the city of Minneapolis, I don't have to give much a message. You can just turn to page 3 of your program here and you can read it. I want to say a few other things. I think what made Augsburg so great, the buildings now are so terrific from what we had when I went to Augsburg in '51, and probably really terrific since some of you people out there attended Augsburg. I'm kind of from the Middle Ages of Augsburg. I graduated in 1951. I sometimes think they paroled me, but I think I was probably one of the worst students Augsburg ever had. But with the help of people, I was indoctrinated to Augsburg through my uncle George Sverdrup, and guys like Uppy or Upseth and Cy Melby. And then we go down the list here. I'd just like to reminisce a little. I know I'm getting old now, Doctor, but I like to reminisce because I look like a playback of my life as I looked out here and saw some of the teachers that I had in the past. Alice Swenson, when it was always good, you know, when I missed a day of school and I needed an excuse. I thank her for that. And the late Mimi Kingsley struggled through Espanolis with me, and I couldn't even speak English, so she had a real rough time, because Bernhard Dolan had a hard time stopping me from saying, "These, those, and them guys do this not no better." Of course, we always had the great old Dr. Ermisch, and Dr. Ermisch was a real dedicated man. It was even said by some of the students that he never used to get his clothes dry cleaned. He'd wash them and give the money to the church, and I think this was really dedication. But Dr. Ermisch, and I say this not laughingly, He used to say one thing I'll always remember him over there in Old Main about 9 o'clock in the morning in Christian ethics. I never did realize what this had to do with Christian ethics, but he said it was wrong to smoke, but if you smoke White Owl cigars, it was all right. And Ernie Anderson and Edor Nelson brought me through sports, which has been a big thing in my life, and I've met a lot of nice people through sports. And I never was much of a singer, but how do you like this? A Norwegian who was really a terrible second tenor, and Mr. Toot tried to make a first tenor out of me. I don't think he's ever been the same since. I know one gentleman out here probably hasn't been the same because everything got better after I left here, and that was Mr. Leland Saturn out here. We had a course I thought was going to be a soft touch called music appreciation, and I found out it wasn't such a soft touch. And after I got done with that course, they called it music depreciation. And I could go on here, but Dr. Kristensen was a big thing in my life. And I'll save the best to last, and I hate to pick any one person out, but Gerda, I have to take my hat off to you and throw you a kiss. Because I never would have got through without Gerda, and she struggled me through the family, one of my sociology courses, and she never knew at that time I was the only boy in the class. And they had always, and not only going steady like somebody said here, I was engaged to Audrey. I sometimes think Audrey got the degree with me. But it came to good use, Gerda. We have 4 children now from 1.5 to 14, and I'm using it. Thank you. But I'd just like to say one thing last. It's easy to get me started, but hard to shut me up. But I'd like to say one thing for Scott Hansen, anyway, the Consulate General and his sidekick, which I could never say the name, Tor Bonnier, pretty close. But they were instrumental in getting me going to Norway. And I just want to know you that I have not forgotten my Norwegian heritage, found out where my grandfather came from and everything else. I found out while I was in Trondheim with Mayor Sagert that why and how Leif Eriksson discovered America in Minnesota. And as you know, I proclaimed last week a joint day of Leif Eriksson, Christopher Columbus Day, because I didn't want to be discriminatory being a Norwegian. But I found out that during one of the first reigns of one of the kings in Trondheim, Norway, that Leif Eriksson came over to get christened. And on the way back, he got lost and discovered Minnesota and America. And we know this to be a historical thing and factual, because my cousin George Sverdrup would never lie or never tell anything wrong. And he told me, and he really said that the real reason that we know this is because when the Indians welcomed Christopher Columbus and stood on that Plymouth Rock, they looked out over the water and they were looking for old Christopher, and they said, "Ere do," can't even say it, "Ere de do, Columbus." So that proves it. Thank you.
Well, if any of you people have any political aspirations and you are not articulate, forget it. Thank you very much. It was good to hear from the state of Minnesota and the city of Minneapolis. And we're now going to pause for a few moments to hear these 2 of Europe's most distinguished musicians who are going to give us some very special music. And I refer now to Mr. Eriksson, who will be accompanied by Knut Nystedt. And as you hear this, think again about next Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock at Northrop Auditorium over at the university. If I could speak Norwegian, I would say that was a sjelden erfaring or something like that. Well, we have now come to the high privilege of having a greeting from the Bishop of the Agder, do we say diocese, Bishop? Of Norway, from Kristiansand. His father was here 50 years ago, and here he is to greet us on our Centennial Banquet Festival occasion. Bishop Stoyland.
Toastmaster, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor and a privilege for me to bring from the Church of Norway greetings and congratulations to Augsburg today. The importance of my task is underlined by the fact that I was appointed to represent our church at this jubilee by a resolution of the church department and His Majesty's government as early as September 1966, 3 years ago. This indicates not only the importance of this event, but also the development of interest and cooperation between Augsburg College today and Norway. The foundation of Crown Prince Harald's scholarship, which makes it possible every year continuously to have a Norwegian student attending your distinguished college, was an event which was greeted with great enthusiasm in my country. And it has been a pleasure for me during these 3 years to be a member of the committee considering the selection of the candidates to this scholarship, together with the pastor of the American congregation in Oslo, of its campus, its evaluation of the heritage from its founders, who all of them came from Norway. And my personal appreciation of being here, I don't need to underline any more, as it has been referred to already by the relationship with the Sverdrup family and the 2 presidents of this college. From Fjord to Freeway is the title of Dr. Krislak's book on the history of Augsburg. And to the F's in the title, I would like to add some more to characterize the founders and the pioneers from 100 years ago. And the way from Fjord to Freeway was the way of faith in fight for freedom and future. Men like Venås, Oftedal and Sverdrups were men of a deep-rooted and determined Christian faith. The writing of Sverdrup makes it perfectly clear that faith to him is more than an intellectual theological entertainment. The living Christian faith, highly influenced from the revival movement of Hans Nielsen Hauge and Gisle Jonsson in Norway, which spread all over the country, was a deep-rooted and determined personal conviction of the truth and the vital power of the gospel of Jesus Christ in man's life. And the freedom which they had gained in their personal life brought to them an inextinguishable longing for greater freedom in the life of the people and in the life of the church. They experienced in the reform work of the church many disappointments, and in those hard years little progress. But the struggle for freedom had wider possibilities and was more promising in this new country, although we know that they got to know that even here real freedom is never gained without personal sacrifice and dedication. And perhaps most impressing is that these men of faith and freedom were men who had vision of future, who made them go steadfast further in spite of difficulties and tribulations to gain the goal of their endeavors. The way from Fjord to Freeway for the pioneers, as well for all those who have been taking part in the life of Augsburg through the years, has been the way of faith in fight for freedom and future. So we, at this celebration, thank God for the work of the pioneers and pray that their good heritage, which they brought into the life of Augsburg, will continue to be an inspiration and pave the way for a still richer future for this beloved College of Augsburg. On behalf of the Church of Norway, I bring to you, Mr. President of Augsburg and all your colleagues, to the boards, the teachers and students of Augsburg, and to the citizens of the larger community, my most cordial greetings and best wishes for the future of this college. Thank you.
Now we shall hear from a representative of the Board of College Education in the American Lutheran Church, and it is our privilege to have Pastor Mark Gravdahl, who is the well-known pastor of First Lutheran Church at Sioux Falls, South Dakota, to speak to us on their behalf. Mark?
Thank you, and members of the family of Augsburg. This greeting is difficult in two respects. On this historic day of moratorium, I've seen some of you wearing buttons that I can only object to, because some of you are wearing buttons which speak about canning Concordia. And as an alumnus of that institution, I'm not at all sure how I feel about that. Secondly, the greeting is difficult because Dr. Hawes, who is our distinguished chairman of the board, was to be here, but he happens to be the president of one of the universities in Wisconsin. And he felt that on this particular evening, it was more proper that he be at his university. And I think you can understand reasons for that. And I think it is that thought that I would want to bring to you. He felt that at this particular time in history, it was necessary for him to be at a particular place. And as we read the history of Augsburg College and give thanks for it, as a church and as the sister institutions of the church, it seems to me that the greatness is that at a particular time in history, you were at the right place. It seems to me that the greatest tragedy that can happen to an institution or to an individual is to not be at the right place at the right time. And so we are thankful for that history. We are thankful that we believe that you are in the right place at the right time today. And it is our prayer that you will continue to exercise that role in the divine will of God. And so we congratulate you, and we pray that as an institution and as individuals, we may always, under the guidance of God, be in the right place at the right time. Thank you.
And now from Dr. Martin Quanbeck, who for many, many years served as Dean of the College, speaking on behalf of the faculty. Dr. Quanbeck.
Mr. Toastmaster and assembled friends, as you can see, I've prepared a long speech. I think that Dr. Anderson ran brisk when he asked me to speak on behalf of this 1969 faculty. First of all, one thing perhaps that he didn't know about, Dean Bailey could have told him. I said to Dean Bailey not so long ago that when evening came, I wasn't so sharp anymore. And he asked me, well, when are you sharp? And I said, well, for a little while at breakfast time. I'm not so sure my wife would even agree to that. The other risk, I think, is in asking a man of my generation, and I'm not sure that President Anderson really remembered that I have been around here for about 1/3 of those 100 years to speak for the faculty of this time. because like many, a person who has lived with an institution for a long time, I tend to look back with a kind of nostalgia for the old and simple days when I knew every student and I knew all the members of the faculty, and we sensed that we were really a simple family unit. And so I might be inclined then, you see, to say, let's go back. Let's be what we were. But I guess I can't do that. After all, this is 1969. And as a member of a modern Augsburg faculty, I must rejoice at things that have happened since 1938, when I came to the faculty. I think I must say that there have been important things in the way of growth, and I don't mean just growth in terms of buildings and campus and size of faculty and size of student body, or even of preparation of faculty, though I think that's important. There have been many things that have happened that are important. But I think that it is important that we have grown also in vision and in diversity. Now, I don't hold that diversity is a pure good, but I think that diversity, which enables us to see more broadly into the problems of the world and its people, to know more intimately and firsthand what constitutes both America's dilemma and America's dream, this diversity is important to us as a faculty and as a college. So with the faculty as a whole, I am sure, I rejoice in the achievement of an openness to the world about us that has come in these later days. It has not come without a certain amount of pain and anguish, and I, looking into my crystal ball, would say there is more of this ahead of us. But it is not the sort of thing from which we can shrink. But one quality of the past we must retain, I feel. In all our diversity, there must be a unity of conviction and of faith. There must be a conviction that the people with whom we work are important, even as they were important when there were few. There must be a faith that in the Spirit of Christ something can be done with and for these people. And this then is something that will unite us, I think, even in our diversity. There must be something that will mean more to us than simply the fact that we are an educational institution in 1969. I think we must think, though some would deny it, that we are a community, a Christian college community, and that as such we have a unity within our diversity today.
Five minutes, Martin, right on the nose. Thank you very much. I have a note from Mayor Stanwyck, he doesn't write all this on here, but he kind of implies that he got carried away with his reminiscing about the good old days, and he forgot to say what he really wanted to say when he was up here, right? You know, we have, as a Centennial Committee, have had a lot of correspondence that has gone on with people in Norway. So this Centennial has been known in many circles over there. And he tells me that he was supposed to bring greetings from King Olaf of Norway to Augsburg College, and he forgot to say it. I didn't do that as well as he would have, but I did it in less time. So thank you. We're now going to hear from the Honorable Martin Sabol, representative of the Alumni Association, member of the Minnesota House of Representatives, who has really distinguished himself as a member of our political family in Minnesota. Martin?
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Anderson, other guests at the head table, and friends of Augsburg. It is my pleasure to bring greetings to Augsburg on its centennial from its product, the alumni. I bring the greetings of those who have come from diverse backgrounds and have grown and developed in the tradition of Augsburg, a tradition of sincerity, service, individuality, and freedom. We would hope that as we departed, we not only went with what we had gained, but that we left for succeeding student generations a base of greater strength and vitality. A celebration such as this can be very important as Augsburg moves ahead to the challenges of the future. We must understand who we are and from where we came as individuals, as institutions, and as a society, so that we can meet the uncertainties and the problems of the future with strength and with understanding of our weaknesses. It is with confidence that we look to the future of Augsburg as a strong, innovative academic institution because it has deep roots in concern for the individual. The second 100 years will be an exciting venture. Again, greetings, thank you, and best wishes from your friends and partners of the future, the alumni.
Now my wife Sophia joins me in making the next introduction. You know, congregations have loomed large in the meaning of the history of Augsburg College. And it was in a beloved congregation up in the state of North Dakota less than 2 decades ago that Sophia and I stood beside the baptismal font and were sponsors for a little baby girl who belonged to some friends of ours. And it is our privilege, Sophia's privilege and my privilege, to now present that girl. We have stood kind of in the background and watched her grow and develop, and she is today the president of the Augsburg student body. Lorraine Grindal.
Thank you. Dr. Jardy and distinguished guests, I would like to greet you on behalf of the students at Augsburg College and thank you for your interest in the Centennial here and the rest of the week. When I say this, I must add a personal note because, as Dr. Jardy mentioned, coming from the tradition where Augsburg was one of the first words I ever spoke, this sort of gathering gives me a warm community feeling that I think will rarely be repeated except maybe at the next Centennial Banquet. I would like the message the students would present to you tonight has been demonstrated in the activities of today, that is, the moratorium for the peace in Vietnam. And our goal today, I think they would say to you, has been not to alienate, but rather to unite us all in a prayer for peace. Besides this, I know that the students would also say thank you for the past 100 years, which have given us the foundations with which to face the social, intellectual, and spiritual challenges of the next 100 years. Augsburg College has never buried its head in the sand, but has always struggled within its Christian perspectives with the questions of each generation. And this is why the students feel, as I do, that it will continue to survive as it has survived through the past 100 years. Thank you.
I have to add a little postscript to that. You know, we oldsters get a little uneasy when somebody reminds us that the destiny of this country, indeed of the whole human family, is in the hands of these people who are under 21. And it's reassuring to see that in the soil of this kind of a college and a family connected with it, and our tradition, that we have this kind of leadership emerging. Thank you very much, Lorraine, for your words on behalf of the most important people of all, student body. Oh, I got carried away just like you did, Mayor Stanwyck, and forgot something here. Oh, yeah. When I was a regent, I used to see the annual audit of Augsburg College, and they list, you know, assets and liabilities and balance it off. If there ever were written an audit that showed the human assets, the human resources of this college, I think that knowledgeable faculty members and members of the Board of Regents and the administration would really put the name of Leonard Ramberg right up on top of the list of human resources that mean something to this school. I say this after having served with him for many, many years as a regent of this school. Leonard, will you come up here and say what's on your heart?
25 years ago, on the occasion of Bethlehem Lutheran Church's 50th anniversary, the Reverend Olin Spencer Reigsted said, "If we can see a little farther than those who have gone before us, it is because we stand on a scaffold which they have builded." Applied to Augsburg and the venerated names of presidents that have been mentioned earlier, and especially our President Emeritus, Bernhard Kristensen. They have built a great Christian college in an urban setting. They made it possible for Dr. Kristoff to state in his history that Dr. Schutz referred to, the college stands toward change without rejecting its 100-year heritage. President Anderson is already involved in this stance toward change. His 6 years of leadership of Augsburg has made this very clear. As I welcome you on behalf of the Board of Regents, may we ask that you join President Anderson and his administration, the excellent faculty of Augsburg College, and the students and alumni in building change on this, one of the first days of Decade 1, Century 2, could make it possible for those who follow to see a little farther into the future. Will you make a bold stance towards change a personal resolve? Thank you.
Thank you to all who brought these greetings to Augsburg on the occasion of its centennial. We now have 4 people, and I have learned in devious ways that these 4 people would like to make some kind of a presentation, and I think each one is very different, to Augsburg College. And I'm going to call on them in this order: Mrs. Helga Sverdrup Ekreim, and Miss Frida Waynos, Mr. Uli Widstein, and Mr. Cyrus Rocchi. May we first hear from Mrs. Helga Sverdrup Ekreim.
And I've been looking forward to it for years. He said, as the postmaster said, Stavanger is much nearer than Oslo. My brother, Leif, he wanted to take a rope and pull of Norway over to America. I would like to do it the other way around, to take a tow and bring all your people over to Norway to tell about Augsburg and of which they know too little. From St. Erik Raude, the father, he the Quakers, the first who went over to America, the first on the little boat Restoration, they come from Stavanger. So Stavanger is a very modest town. We say we come from Stavanger, it doesn't matter. I hope you will not be too angry with me for being from Stavanger. But also from Augsburg College, for where I was a teacher for many years. Helland, who wrote the book about George Sverdrup, he came from that school. He graduated from Augsburg School. When I was here in 1957, I was so impressed with Augsburg College, but I'm still more impressed today. And I'm thinking of the Irishman who asked a painter if he would paint a picture of his father. And the painter said, "But I never knew him. Haven't you a picture?" "No," the Irishman said, "but you have painted God, and then you can paint my father." So the artist went along and painted a picture and gave it to the Irishman. And the Irishman, he looked a bit astonished. "Yes, doesn't it resemble the painter's?" Painter said. "Yes, but how my father has changed the man." That's the way I think Augsburg too has changed during all these years. I'm going to present you with a painting today. And the painter asked me, he wouldn't put his name on it first, but then if I was allowed to tell, if I would please tell that his father was a great friend and the cantor of my grandfather and the father of the first George Sverdrup. And so it is. So I promised to tell that, but he did so. It's such, but I cannot mention the Sverdrups without mentioning the Oftedals. Johan Sverdrup, who introduced parliamentarism into Norway, he was a radical, and by he became less radical, and he didn't wish to break with Sweden. The people were not so satisfied with him as before, and when he was about 74, he still wished to come into parliament. And who was it who brought him into parliament? That was Rogaland. That was Lars Oftedal, the brother of Sven Oftedal, and he made him come into parliament again. When my father was something he didn't like, he said to me, "You are not a real Sverdrup." "Yes," I said, "I'm awfully sorry, but there are good people on the other side as well." My mother liked that immensely. Her father, too, was a great friend of Lars Oftedal, the brother of Sven Oftedal. So there's always been a constant going backward and forward between these two people. Now I wish to present to you the coat of arms of the Sverdrup family. This isn't all I like about this. That this beginning is a life on earth and how it blossoms into heaven. But I never liked that sword up there. Halvdan Koht, in his excellent book about Johan Sverdrup, says that fighting spirit is a distinguishing mark of the family Sverdrup. I could never understand that. My father was a man full of peace, and his favorite hymn was, what is it? Fred til bod forbittet savn, ga oss Gud i Jesu navn. Fred oss Jesus etterlot, kristendom er in sum, fredens evangelium. And I never heard any unpeaceful word, neither from him and my uncles. They were always fighting for peace. But when they were fighting, not only for democracy, but they were fighting to all this which Mr. Professor Forel explained so well to us on Sunday, for all social Christian activities in policy and in all sort of Christian work. And I hope that the spirit will continue in Augsburg and continue to make it fighting for all that is good and peaceful in the world. Thank you.
You know, that hooks up with what happened on the campus here today. Lorraine, that Norwegian that she quoted had something to do with the gospel of peace. Well, now we move on to Frida Winos.
This young lady celebrated her 92nd birthday last week here at Augsburg College. There aren't many colleges that can have the daughter of the founding president 100 years later.
Ja, dere vet at jeg 92 år, og da kan man ikke vente så meget av meg. Og at jeg skal holde noen tale, og jeg taler ikke på engelsk. Jeg taler på norsk. Og jeg vil bare si noen få ord. Og det at jeg synes at det et helt eneste under at jeg her. Det et under. It's a wonder. At man kan være her på sin fars gamle skole 100 år efter. 100 år efter. Tenk. Og at jeg kan være i den vigør. At jeg kan stå her. Det et under. Og jeg som jo har fulgt med en god del av historien, jeg synes at det det eneste merkelige ting at gjennom alle gjenvordigheter og kamper og strid så skal jeg få lov til å ha den store, store ære og glede å få være her. Det en takknemlighet mot Augsburg College som jeg aldri vil glemme de få årene jeg har igjen. Hjertelig, hjertelig takk for at jeg kan få være her. hjertelig takk.
You know, that could not be translated, but for those of you who didn't understand any of it, she said that it was just an amazing wonder for her that she could be here and actually stand in this place after 100 years. And at the end, she spoke with great feeling about the joy and the honor and the privilege that had been afforded her to be a part of this centennial. That was wonderful. Manga talk. Like you said. Then Mr. Ole Widstein.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, members of the staff, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. There has been spoken much about traveling. I remember Bishop Støylen was speaking about the Vikings, and Mr. Hambro has spoken about Norwegian traveling all over the world. There are many years ago, since Leif Eriksson went to America 969 years ago. And my grandfather, he crossed the Atlantic 869 years later. And we, my family and I, have come here from Norway to this celebration 100 years after him again. The sailing itself, so long a distance in former days, surely was a problem. But the navigation and finding the way was another. The Vikings have not written about their manners of finding the way over the ocean, but when we look up to the sky by night, as in the terrarium of Minneapolis, we have a suspicion about how the sun by day and the moon and the stars by night led them the right way. I had the good fortune to come here by air. We followed a SAS flight from Norway to America, and sitting to the starboard, looking out of the window, I could observe the moon on the right wing of the aeroplane, rather constant at the same place. That would say the captain on board, a Norwegian, kept steady. I think we all have to do so to reach our aims. An idea ought to have a good plan, a good start, good leaders, and a steady course. All this has Augsburg College had for 100 years, and I hope and wish this will continue. With these words, I will bring my best wishes and thanks to the leaders of Augsburg College from my family, that we were allowed to come here for this occasion. To Gerda Mortensen and Mr. President Andersen, I say heartily thanks. And as a sign of gratitude to Augsburg College, I deliver this jug to its president, Mr. Andersen, to receive it as a remembrance.
You can read it.
I'm not bilingual.
Hilsen og takk fra Venus' barn og barnebarn 1869, 1969.
I think that was 1869, 1969. Thank you, thank you.
The Europeans always outdo us when it comes to giving gifts, don't they? Have you ever been to Europe? They always do. Thank you all very much. Now we're going to call on Cyrus Rocchi, who was introduced a while ago, who also wishes to make a presentation.
Mr. Toastmaster and friends of Augsburg. You know, as we reminisce, it wasn't long ago that you'd have to ask direction to where to find Augsburg. Now we are on the highway, but it is not identified. And rather than make a talk, I'd like to read a letter that has been sent to your president, Mr. Anderson. The prayers and good wishes of more than 900,000 members of Aid Association for Lutherans are with you as you and your associates observe the 100th anniversary of Augsburg College. It is our sincere hope that the foundation built during the past century will serve you well as you move into even greater and more successful future. As tangible evidence of our interest in Augsburg College, its administrators and its students, we of AL offer our gift of $10,000 to you in this your 100th anniversary year. May the items purchased with this gift add substantially to the image of the college. They're going to build the name out here and put a flagstaff, and there's $10,000. It's yours.
Let me say, I've been bugging this fellow Oscar because I drive on that freeway over to St. Paul many, many times, and I've said, when are you going to let the whole world know that Augsburg is on the main street, USA? And he said, someday we will. So congratulations, Oscar.
Thank you. And thank you, Cy and Aid Association for Lutherans. I can report that the project is underway and that very shortly there will be flying on the freeway from very substantial flagstaffs the American flag, the Christian flag, the college flag, the city flag, and the United Nations flag, all on the freeway, identified also with a large sign, Augsburg College, illuminated on Ernest Tower, because of the gift of Aid Association. Thank you very much.
It's 10 o'clock. We still have 2 hours left of this first century. You know, it's like New Year's Eve. You knew that, didn't you? We were going to keep you here till midnight, and we're all going to ring the bells and go into the second century. But I'm really not serious. I had a 20-minute tribute all laid out here for Oscar Anderson, but in view of the situation, I'm going to borrow some of Mark Gravdahl's words and say, Oscar Anderson, the right man for the right time for Augsburg College. Oscar, it's yours.
Thank you, Luther. I'm glad that you didn't give that speech, or I would have told a story. The story about the conductor and the brakeman on a certain train that could never agree. When they came to a little town spelled E-U-R-E-L-I-A. And when the brakeman got off at the front end of the train, he'd holler, "You're a liar!" And the conductor would swing off the back of the train and holler, "You really are." But I won't tell the story. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a great occasion. And I told the committee that there should be no speeches tonight of any length, and everybody has stayed within the mark, and I'm going to do the same. But I would like to, first of all, thank the people who have made these wonderful presentations to us, this beautiful coat of arms of the Sverdrup family, this splendid gift from the family of the first president, and of course this wonderful gift from Aid Association, and all of the things which have come to Augsburg College during this centennial period. But I want to give out some gifts tonight to people who certainly deserve them. And in connection with our centennial, we had a very modest medal struck, which embodied the Centennial Seal, which you will find in your program both on the outside and on page 12 with a brief explanation of it. This Centennial Seal, with necessary modifications, is now the seal of the college for its second century. In order that we might show our appreciation to a host of people who have had so much to do with Augsburg's development, its celebration, and what it is today, we would like to present bronze medals to all of the members of the Centennial Commission, and you see their names in the back of the program, to all of the regents and former regents at Augsburg, to all the members of the President's Board of Advisors, to all distinguished alumni of the institution, to the Centennial Steering Committee, to faculty members with 10 years or more of service to the institution, and all faculty members emeriti, to all student body presidents down through the years of Augsburg's history, and certain other selected individuals, including the graduate of Augsburg who designed this splendid seal that provides us with the identification which we need and have as a college, a liberal arts college under the cross in an urban setting with the theme Through Truth to Freedom. Now we'll see to it that the people that I have mentioned get these medals. But I'm very happy tonight to present the silver medals struck for this occasion to certain people who are especially important to us at this moment in the college's history. And I want to take this opportunity to present the first one to the man whom all of us love and honor and who has already been shown appreciation tonight, but we want to do this again, to Dr. Bernhard Kristensen, the Distinguished President Emeritus of Augsburg College. May I present the first silver medal to you, Dr. Kristensen. And to the man who did such a wonderful job getting the office of president ready for me during that interim year when he was president, Dr. Leif Harbo. To the man who for 5 years has chaired all of the meetings that have been held of the Centennial Steering Committee, our good friend, Dr. Luther Gerdy. To the president or chairman of the Board of Regents at Augsburg College at this point in its history, Mr. Leonard Ramberg, Senior Vice President of the Northwestern National Bank. And I think I can be assured that this will be in safekeeping until he gets it. We would like to present one of these silver medals also to the governor of our state, the Honorable Harold Lavandier, and we will ask his daughter to deliver it to him on our behalf. To a man who has done so much for Augsburg College and provided such leadership in marshaling forces from this community on behalf of the college, the Honorable Walter Judd. Dr. Judd, Chairman of the Board of Advisors for the President. To the official representative from the Church of Norway, Bishop Kara Stoyland, the preacher at the festival service on Sunday morning in Melby Hall, Bishop Stoyland. To the president of the American Lutheran Church, of which we are a part and which we seek to serve, to Dr. Frederick Schutz. And I give this to him not only because he's the president of the church, but because he married Mrs. Anderson and myself. I have a medal also for the man who was the chairman of our Centennial Building Committee, Mr. Robert Björklund, but he is not able to be here tonight. To the man who has authored the very interesting and so easily read history of Augsburg College, Dr. Carl Kristoff, the author of From Fjord to Freeway. Dr. Kristoff. To the man who has written an outstanding piece of music commissioned for the Centennial, this outstanding composer and musician from Norway, Mr. Knut Nystedt. Mr. Nystedt. Did you want to say a word? This is an opportunity also to get another commercial in for 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon over at Northrop. Don't miss it. And to the man who translated the Sverdrup writings and made it possible for the English reading world to have for the first time important selections from the writings of Georg Sverdrup, the translator of these works, Dr. Melvin Helland. I think I've gotten everybody here now. Let's see. I don't think I've missed anybody. Yes, I have one for the mayor. I've got one for you. You step up here and get one of these, will you, Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. Really nice meeting you.
And now the one that gives me the greatest pleasure, I guess, to present. The young lady who has done so much for Augsburg College as its first Dean of Women, serving for 41 years, and then serving in the capacity of the Executive Secretary of the Centennial Committee, the inimitable, irreplaceable, wonderful Gerda Mortensen. There is one other gentleman that I would like to acknowledge his generosity, and I should have mentioned it in connection with the work that Dr. Kristoff has done, a very fine gift from one of the members of our Board of Regents, making it possible for us to have the history written, a gift from Mr. Marvin Borgelt, and I'd like to have Mr. Borgelt stand. Will you stand, Mike? Thank you very much. Thank you. We've got to bring this thing to a close and get on into Century 2. And so I'm simply going to say that by the grace of God, we will move into Century 2 with appreciation for the past, for the heritage which we have, which will not hamper us, but which will help us. Appreciation for our heritage, for the students, the faculty, the staff, the regents, the friends, and everyone who is interested in this institution. We move into Century 2 with a deep sense of appreciation. We move into it also with awareness of today's task, for Century 2 will be lived one day at a time with persons in the here and now, people with tremendous potential, people who are anguishing over today's difficulties, but who have marvelous beauty of spirit. Ours is not simply to build a college or a reputation or a monument, but as Georg Sverdrup said in his commencement address in 1884, what we're about is the development of people. It's with that awareness that we move into Century 2. We move into Century 2 with expectations for great changes and great possibilities. I think we know where we are going, for the faculty has indicated its willingness, and the Board of Advisors has given its support, and I'm sure the Board of Regents will give its approval to a statement of direction which we believe will fulfill the four great objectives of this institution: to be a free Christian college, to be an institution with academic excellence, to stress those liberal arts which will make it possible for an individual to be a full person, and to also, in the fourth place, make the fullest possible use of the great potential which exists in this community. We move into Century 2 with great expectation, and we move into it with confidence in God, not in ourselves, not even in education or in Augsburg, but in the God who loves and calls us and abides with us. Century 2 is unknown, but these are the words which come to me. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Be not frightened, neither be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. In that confidence, forward into Century 2. Thank you.
We've come to the end now, and I'm going to make the last presentation of a silver medal to Oscar Anderson and ask him to unwrap and unbox this medal, lay it on that walnut top of his desk, that it may always remind him that the same Lord, the same Father, the same Holy Spirit that has enabled his forebears in the office of president of the college will always be with you, Oscar. This is your medal. It has been a great day, a long one, but I think a God-pleasing day on the campus of Augsburg College. Let us all rise now and hear the familiar benediction. May the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, keep your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Amen.